Okay. I'm making a call out post for all those people that say, oh, all those boomers and stuff that are always like, oh, or Gen Xers for that matter, that are like, oh, get a job, get a job, get a job, to Gen Y and Gen Z all the time. It's not really a solution. It's just, what you don't understand is, look, in my time, in my life, my 24 years of existence on this planet Earth, in base reality, I have accrued about 60 to 80,000 dollars in value, and I know for a lot of people that's not a lot, but I'm just saying how much. Anyways, and that's with me working like a year, then not working for 2 years, just minimum wage type jobs, and then working for 2.5. I mean, I haven't worked that much actually. Warren Buffett said, "Get your first 100,000, then after that, it doesn't matter what you did, get your first 100,000." Something like that. But yeah, and I invested in crypto, I invested in stocks, I was doing all that. And then I started to realize, I was like, well, this seems to become a zero sum game. Because it's like, okay, then you start knowing who's tugging at you. Because if you start calculating out this and that and the other of what you have planned to do with your money when you get it, like, oh, I want to buy this car, or I want to buy this house, or do this, that, or the other, you start to feel the pull of other entities or wherever it's clumped up. And then at some point it becomes a game where you're just really infinitely running on this treadmill, and then it's starting to like stretch out and take infinitely longer for you to get your goal if you're in some of the lower class. So then it becomes sort of a blame game at that point, which I don't like, because people are like, oh, well, it's X entity or Y entity or Z entity, and I'm just the middle guy, and I'm like, well, yeah, okay, so it just becomes a huge blame game. If everyone plays the fiat game, they start blaming each other. That's how it goes. That's literally how it goes. So I'm like, okay, because I mean, it starts as an idea. How about we use banknotes for our currencies to travel faster than having to haul around all this metal, right? It's a good idea at first. It's like, okay, that makes sense. Well, I mean, obviously, at some point, our banknotes are going to digitize. There's just a given. But what I'm saying is, I feel like this is basic economics. I did take what was it, macro or microeconomics class in community college. So it's not like this some foreign subject to me. But well, like I said, it starts as an idea. You're like, okay, you're basically printing the idea. You start making banknote 1, banknote 2, banknote 3, and you just keep printing. You start printing the idea. You're like, as many people as would participate in the system would participate in the system, and you keep track of that by, like, how much of that currency is in circulation. Well, it becomes hard once you start digitizing what's already out there, because now you're kind of like, you're trying to adapt a new system back into a previous. It's kind of a hard thing. So basically, I'm saying it just becomes a faith or a hope thing at that point. You see cryptocurrencies, how they rise and fall individually. They're no different from stocks, really. And I'm saying stocks is upon this entire economy system, that whichever dollar or currency is decided as the top or the king or whatever, I'm saying there's going to eventually be a queen of that, and then fiat, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then it's going to like Fibonacci sequence down. I don't know. It's an endless game. So I'm saying basically we're just trading in concepts and ideas now. That's what cryptocurrency is. That's what stocks are. they're just faiths and hopes and abilities for these companies to do what they're transparent about. And transparency makes it communication faster and easier, which is why we even made it into a digitized process anyways, because obviously digital is much faster than word of mouth and traveling in person, right? So it's just, I don't know, it's this digital age stuff. So yeah, if you, I don't know, I'm gonna stop talking about that because it's just, you start seeing things in bubbles. You start counting in bubbles and say, okay, I don't know. It's my part of my working orb theory. Anyways, that does bring me to another point. Because if you can print money, if you can print ideas, then ideas and concepts, if you can print those, then how is time any different from that, right? That's why I said money and time are inextricably tied. So I'm saying you can print yourself more time. You can literally do it. And people, wonder how you could do that. And then that's where it goes all the way up into understanding of quantum mechanics. It's like, okay, well, black holes are just thermal traps. These light echoes or whatever would come out of a white hole would be a reversed black hole. It would be printing time. It'd be printing stuff back into existence in a reverse function. Or inverse, would you say? Anyways. Yeah. And then, not only that, before I stop this video, I'm working on something I like to call turnaround theory. Once I started like delving into this concept of time, and just like drilling down into it, I started to understand a lot more like slight and in-between implications that people might miss. That if you extrapolate out over infinite periods of time on orders of magnitude, there starts to become problems. So that's just what I've been working on. Because it's like this shorter fluctuation of time. It's like this quantum time, So turnaround theory. That's why, as usual, if this stuff sounds a bit wish-washy, that's because it is at this point in time. That's how theories work. You build them up. You just might start calling it theory, but then eventually becomes scientific theory once you start practicing a scientific method. And then it starts rising up and starts getting more notoriety, right? And then more acceptance, and it's like the overwhelming preponderance of evidence at that point. It's just it becomes accepted, and that's not a bad process. It's a working process. That's why I said colloquial theory is different from scientific theory. Scientific theory is more like, okay, like to what we can sure enough as sure enough as there's technology and stuff, like we've understood it to this extent. It's like a 99.99999, as much as you can understand it, I guess, in a linear sense. I'm saying you can go already give yourself the cookie and say, oh, technically this is this demarcation arbitrarily, and start seeing things fractally, I suppose, fractionally, exponentially, logarithmically. you start using math more. Anyways, I'm starting to go off on a tangent. Just like PBS Spacetime criticized John Archibald Wheeler's stuff. If this sounds a bit wish-washy, that's because it is. Well, he didn't get to complete it, right? You see what I'm saying? I'm saying if you just printed him more time, and I'm like, well, I'm just essentially going to advocate for this person that can no longer advocate for themselves. So this turnaround theory is about the development of brains and how your brain's essentially a muscle. not using it, not learning something is, everything's habitual. And anyone who's heard of Pavlov's dog would know what I'm talking about. You can habitualize a behavior and it becomes a trait or ability or a skill that's well, in Pavlov's dogs, in that experiment, he just made it to where the dogs would salivate when they heard the bell ring because they knew what it meant. Um, I'm saying, but could you take a habit you already have and hone it or like harness it, right? So the ability to learn. Could I make that a constant process and get exponentially faster at it? Could I? And then when stacked up against people who don't do that, would it have any like effect? I'm saying on a scale of time, of course it would. So I'm saying perhaps this is, if someone goes on vacation, like my ex-partner went on vacation to Vegas. And I'm saying, moving, we're all technically moving at the speed of light constantly. That's just the, if you know general relativity and special relativity, you'll understand what I mean. So we're constantly getting perturbed by things. Our atoms, our molecules, our particles, our makeup is moving throughout space and time. Obviously, that's just not a wrong statement. Um, I'm saying, but if your brain works, if you can train your brain to think like a quantum computer instead of a classical computer, then it can work in tandem faster. And I'm saying, would that difference, if I had been training myself to think like a quantum computer, and skip over logics in like an eon or epoch way, like a fractional sense of time. And then, because what I can do is like on a number line, the big marks, demarcations, and you can backfill in between. I'm saying once I told my partner, I said, okay, you understand things in a classical sense, perhaps Newtonian physics, essentially. If I was just to teach you, because I sing it on a number line, I sing third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension. I said, if I was just to teach you fifth dimensional physics, and you would just like believe me a little bit, then we can backfill this gap together, which is quantum. So, but he always thought I was crazy because it was a working theory. I couldn't like substantiate what other people hadn't accepted as substantiation yet, right? That just makes sense to me. Like, if I'm in the middle of something, how can you ask for the end of it? You know what I'm saying? Anyways, so on the difference between classical and quantum timescales during my this is why we might understand what it means for a pet to get separation anxiety, because like how they say in dog years, things are different. So for your dog it feels like forever when you go to work or something or you leave, right? So they're more than happy when you come back. And they throw themselves upon you in a way. They're your responsibility and you're their responsibility in kind of a way. This is why you may see cross-species empathy, where a dog might try to get the attention of like a paramedic or something, or someone that can get help for their owner if their owner is injured. That's what I'm saying. This quantum computers would easily help us understand pets, which is why I support it, because I like pets, especially cat, my kitty cat. So yeah, going back to separation anxiety, I was in a relationship with my ex. That's just a true statement. I was. Okay. So during our time away from each other, if I was operating on quantum time, and my partner was operating on classical time. On that vacation, our subjective experience of time is so vastly different that may be the reason why I feel certain ways that my partner did not understand. You see what I'm saying? And that caused that rift, that divide, that disagreement. I'm saying this will also help understand why divorces happen. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a fundamental disagreement. It's like, okay, where is your reasoning? Like, what dimension is your scale of reasoning in this moment, on this subject, on this matter? I'm saying our language still doesn't really account for that. Well, hieroglyphics and like pictographs and emojis perhaps do, because they can convey, like, you know how they say, like an image or a painting is worth 1,000 words. I'm saying, okay, what if you were to randomize those words? And then there, you say this is randomization 1, randomization 2. I start thinking in simulations. I'm like, okay, this is outcome 1, outcome 2, outcome, and that's exactly what a quantum computer would. You feed it hypothetical scenarios essentially in a wave function sense. So yeah. Anyways, you see, by using this turnaround theory, I'm basically feeding back into my previous theory, just thereby strengthening it. This is perhaps why in models, black holes, they seem to be brighter on one side slightly. Maybe it's that stretch that even. Okay. Anyways, it has to do with reflections and bending. It's so massive that it's bending. Okay, I start to go into what people know. It's so massive that it's bending space-time. That's a given. But it's bending. I don't know. I'm gonna get off of that because I already have stuff to do. But yeah, essentially, economies, bubbles, which is how you understand the difference between cryptocurrencies. Their ideas, their faiths. Okay. Something else I was going to say is the Higgs field is an indication of how you can basically unravel all of the entire periodic table of elements. You can unravel it all into like a simple equation, a field equation which you can write wave functions into. You see what I'm saying? The Higgs boson. Well, if there's a Higgs field, you could deduce or deduct and make a boson field, which would just be, I guess, the aggregate of all. I like to call it a scoreboard. The periodic table of elements is a scoreboard because it tells you, it literally tells you how long the universe has. It gives you a scoreboard of the universe's existence by which you can use it, cross-confirm it. Radioactive isotope decay. Anyone who's like a paleontologist would know that. Okay, I'm starting to go off on tangents again, but yep, you could use the periodic table of elements and make one equation out of it, call it a field. I call those dimensions. So, I think that's about all I've got to say. Yeah, it's useful to think in hypotheticals. It's useful to think in hypothetical scenarios. It's useful to think in simulations. It's useful to use simulations as examples. It's useful to use story simulations, narrative simulations as examples. So, some people might clown on the fact that, someone might use World of Warcraft or Halo like me to explain a situation, or Warhammer 40k. But I'm saying, as sure as that story or narrative exists in reality, just like radioactive isotopic decay. You could extract, I mean, they're strings of information, aren't they? They're written into the fabric of reality because they were spoken and they were talked about, and perhaps games and lore was. I'm saying you could, just as you could write one equation for the universe, you could write one equation for, like, simulation scenarios, because they're done deals. I'm saying, as much as I talk about Halo Reach, like, it's a done deal. It's a finished video game. I'm saying the lore can be expanded and all this other stuff, but the simulation was already played out. And, it was a free will simulation, but it still had narrative or overarching narratives. It still had filtration points, like great filters. It was still a self-contained story. It still had chapters to it, although you had free will to do it in any method possible. And then when you extrapolate this out further, that's just like GTA 5. And it's like, it's this completely free will mode where you can do anything, but you still have to, there's still narrative elements to it. Even in online, there's still, you can make money in any way you want, but there's still like things that you would, these story elements to it, if that makes sense. And there, it's like, and then you start to see things in terms of MMOs. It's like, okay, then a completely free will one, but without like major themes, or there's quests, there's the main story quests, but there's side quests, and that's what I'm saying. I'm talking in simulations now. Anyways, where I wanted to go before I actually legitimately finished with this video, I wanted to mention how I joke about the Da Vinci Cube, Da Vinci physics and stuff. Well, it's because in Sandtrap in Halo 3, there's a map that has that hidden in the what's it called, the frigate, the UNSC frigate, and in GTA, in the corner of the map, I believe, in a discrete location, there's something similar. I'm saying that's basically writing the entire physics engine. You know what I'm saying? And you're like, well, this is the best I can write the physics to, so it has some sort of value. I'm saying you can do that with the universe. Well, this is the best we can understand the physics to, so you write an equation for it. And it's a working process. The more you understand the physics of reality, the more you're going to add on to the equation or fix it in the future. This is why, like, every single time you're like, well, it doesn't. I'm saying the grand unifying theory of everything would have to include everything, which is everything in the universe, even history, all of it. So, yeah, this is essentially what quantum computing allows for.